Hello everyone, and welcome to the National Cryptologic Museum Spotlight Series. I'm Rob Simpson, the librarian.
And I'm Spencer Allenbaugh, the collections manager. So what do you have for us today, Rob?
Well, it doesn't look super visually interesting, does it? But I want to talk about Herbert Yardley a little bit. We've talked about Herbert Yardley a lot. Briefly, you know, he was one of the first cryptologists in U.S. history to actually start an organization. And so after, you know, he served in World War I as a cryptologist. After World War I, he led MI8, Cipher Bureau, the Black Chamber, as he called it, which was jointly, jointly funded by the State Department and the Army. And then on the eve of the Great Depression, it closed. And so he needed to make money to support his family, so he wrote a tell-all book called The American Black Chamber, and revealed America's cryptologic successes, you know, post-World War I. And the book made him very successful. He made a lot of money on it. He got a lot of notoriety. He was a celebrity. He needed to write another book to continue his income. And so there's a second book called Japanese Diplomatic Secrets. And it was a much less interesting book, by his words. His publisher presented it to his agent presented it to his original publisher, Bobbs Merrill. And Bobbs Merrill looked at it and they weren't interested in it. Now, whether they weren't interested in it because it wasn't as interesting a book or because they had had their fill of fighting with the government, who knows? But they passed on it. So his agent took it to Macmillan, and Macmillan was looking at it. At this point, the government became aware that this book existed. Now, they probably became aware of it because Macmillan told them. But the book was seized. So the ambitious prosecutor for the Southern District of New York named Thomas Dewey, who did not defeat Truman in 1948, despite the headlines, he and U.S. Marshals came to Macmillan, seized the book, and it disappeared. Yardley didn't fight this. And William Friedman tells us in something he wrote where he was talking to Yardley. Yardley visited William Friedman right after this happened. And Yardley said, I'm not going to fight it because the book wasn't that interesting and it probably wasn't going to sell very well. So that's all the historians knew about this book for many years. And then in 1979, David Kahn found it.
Oh, wow.
In the National Archives, in the Justice Department's files. He submitted for it to be released and declassified. It was released. He got his hands on it. And when he started reading through it, he got to the title page. And the title page says, written by Marie Cluse. It didn't say Herbert Yardley. So, David Kahn, being David Kahn, found her and interviewed her. And what she said about the book was that Herbert Yardley had handed her over to her a whole bunch of intercepted messages, decrypted and translated messages, and then she had kind of stitched those messages together to create a narrative form.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so Kahn wrote an article about it in the journal Cryptologia. Scholars knew about it, and then Kahn talked to a friend of his, Emil Levine, who is a retired Navy cryptologist, and said, you know, you ought to try to get this published. So Levine went to NARA, got a copy of it, put it together with a bunch of articles about the manuscript, and put it together on kind of a really early version of an interactive CD where he had hyperlinked all of these things together.
That's cool.
And then he was working with the G&N Park Press, who we've mentioned before, to get it published, and they went out of business. So Levine kind of set the project aside and went on about his life. I got a call a couple of years ago. Somebody had discovered that this existed. And so I went into our records, and David Kahn had donated to us 2 copies of that CD. Oh, wow. So we were able to pull out the manuscript part of it, and I have it as a PDF digitally that people can access if they contact us and have access to it. So it's a really neat story.
That is a neat story. It's a cool little mystery too.
Yeah.
Wow.
Do you have any questions?
So why did the government seize the book? Like, what was what kind of authority did they have?
Oh, what gave them the right to take it? That's a really good question. They took it under the authority of the 1917 Espionage Act. If Yardley had fought it, he might have won because the Espionage Act might not have given them the right to do that.
Yeah.
But right after the publication of the Black Chamber, Congress and the rest of the government didn't want this to happen again. So a bill was going through Congress at the same time that became known as the Yardley Act. Actually, I have a copy of a piece of it. Let me read kind of the salient language out of what was eventually passed. The House version of it was problematic for First Amendment reasons, but the Senate version stripped all of that out, and it became a really concise law. The big thing was that said, whoever by virtue of his employment by the United States, so it has to be somebody who works for the government, shall obtain or have custody or access to any diplomatic code without authorization or authority, publish it, or any other code which was obtained while in the process of transmission between any foreign government and its diplomatic mission in the United States. So that would cover all of those things that Yardley had handed off. Shall be fined no more than $10,000 and imprisoned for no more than 10 years. Oh, wow. So, and that's in U.S. Code Title 18. And so that language still exists in U.S. Code today with slight modifications because of subsequent legislation. Yeah. So, and it's considered the Yardley Act.
Yeah.
So if you want to leave a legacy, commit a really cool crime.
Well, that's one way to do it.
Well, that's all we have this week, ladies and gentlemen. So thank you for watching and have a great day.